In 1946, a British rescue ship reached a small island off the coast of Scotland. On every official map printed since 1890, that island was empty. No people, no buildings, no reason for anyone to ever go there. That was the official story. It stayed the official story for 50 years. But when the rescue crew stepped onto the rocky shore, they did not find empty land. They found smoke rising from chimneys. They found gardens growing behind stone walls. They found 500 people, men, women, children who had never once set foot on mainland Britain in their entire lives. All of them alive. Some of them angry that help had taken so long to arrive. Nobody on that rescue ship had been told what to expect. Most of them still believed, right up until the moment they stepped onto the shore, that they were sailing toward an empty rock. Mysterious. For decades, almost nobody in Britain knew this island had ever been anything but empty. The full story sat locked inside a government vault, sealed under strict secrecy laws, untouched for 50 years. Today, that seal is finally broken. Newly released files, a private wartime diary, and testimony from surviving families have let researchers piece together for the first time what really happened on that island, and why the silence lasted 6 long years. Authoritative. This is the story of Station Zero. It begins, like so many secrets of the Second World War, with one desperate question, asked at the darkest possible moment. To understand what happened, researchers had to start with one person, a young physicist named Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was 26 years old when she was sent to the island in 1940. She was brilliant, careful, and deeply loyal to her country. Her job was simple on paper: work on radar improvements that could help Britain survive the war. She arrived carrying one suitcase and a single letter addressed to her parents that she was told she could send only once she reached the island, and never again after that. She did not know that first night whether she would ever see her parents again. She only knew she had been trusted with something important, and that trust felt, at the time, like enough. But Eleanor did something she was strictly forbidden to do. She kept a diary. Written records of any kind were against the island's own security rules. A single honest page could put the entire secret at risk. Eleanor wrote anyway, hiding her notebook behind a loose panel in her cabin wall. She had no way of knowing that her small act of quiet defiance would become, 50 years later, the single most important document in this entire mystery. Her diary survived when almost nothing else did. Through her eyes, researchers today can finally trace exactly what happened, year by year, inside a place that officially never existed. Eleanor's goal in 1940 was straightforward: do good work, keep her family safe. But as the years pass and the silence deepens, her goal quietly changes. She stops writing only for herself. She starts writing carefully, as if someone might read these pages one day and need to know the truth. Every part of this story pulls in more than one direction at once. There is the basic struggle of survival. 500 people cut off from the outside world with no promise that anyone is coming back for them, and no proof that Britain itself has even survived the war. There is a second struggle, quieter but just as dangerous. A struggle against the very government that built the island in the first place. A system so overwhelmed by a global war that it slowly, carelessly loses track of the people it swore to protect. And there is a third struggle, the one researchers only fully understood after reading Eleanor's later diary pages. A struggle inside the island itself, between people who desperately want to go home and people who begin to believe, as the years pass, that home might not be worth going back to anymore. These three conflicts do not stay separate for long. By the middle of the war, they start colliding directly into each other, and the people caught in the middle rarely get to choose which fight they end up fighting. The first major obstacle arrives in the spring of 1942. A supply ship, due at the island every single month without fail, simply vanishes. No wreckage, no distress call, nothing at all. 2 weeks later comes a second obstacle, a desperate radio message from the island describing something strange in the water near the shore and requesting immediate evacuation. London says no. From that point forward, the obstacles pile up fast. Food grows scarce, medicine runs low. Every winter becomes a small battle of its own, fought with dwindling supplies and no way of knowing when or if more will ever arrive. Trust between the scientists and the military officers guarding them begins to crack, each side quietly wondering how far the other can really be trusted. And slowly, a new obstacle appears, one nobody had planned for at all. A growing number of people on the island who start to wonder if rescue is even something they still want. To understand how 500 people ended up trapped on a supposedly empty island, we have to go back to the spring of 1939, before a single bomb had fallen on London. Britain's wartime leadership was worried about something most people never think about during a war. Not just tanks, not just ships, mines. Britain had physicists working on problems at the very edge of splitting the atom. It had chemists developing materials for engines that existed nowhere else on Earth. It had code breakers who understood enemy secrets better than the enemy did. If one bomb landed on the wrong street, in the wrong city, on the wrong day, years of irreplaceable knowledge could vanish in a single second. And if the country was ever invaded, that same knowledge could fall straight into enemy hands. So a decision was made. Britain needed an ark, not for animals, for mines. Planners searched the coastline for weeks before choosing a small, remote island off the northwest edge of Scotland in the wild waters of the Outer Hebrides. Every published map going back to 1890 already marked it as empty and useless. That made it perfect. The project was given a name meant to sound like nothing at all if anyone overheard it: Station Zero. Its funding never appeared in a single government budget line. Instead, it was split into small pieces and hidden inside 3 completely unrelated departments. In the end, only 6 people in the entire government fully understood what Station Zero really was. Construction took over a year, carried out mostly at night by small crews who were never told what they were actually building. By the autumn of 1940, workers had carved concrete bunkers into the cliffs, disguised to look like natural stone from any passing ship. They raised a radio mast built at an angle that kept it hidden from the sea. They built greenhouses behind blackout glass so residents could grow food no matter how long they had to stay. They even laid out a small stone courtyard at the center of it all, a detail that seemed unimportant at the time, but would later appear in one of the only photographs the outside world would ever see of life on the island. Then came the people. 500 scientists, engineers, and their families moved quietly in small groups so no pattern would ever be noticed. Some were told they were going on an extended government retreat. Others were simply given an order and told not to ask questions. Every strong mystery needs strong people at its center, and this one has several. Eleanor Vance, careful and principled, becomes the emotional core of the entire story through her diary. She is the kind of person who notices details other people miss, which is exactly why her writing later becomes so valuable. She rarely writes about her own fear directly. Instead, she writes about small things: who shared their bread that week, who stopped smiling. Those small details, researchers now believe, tell us more about the island's slow decline than any official report ever could. Then there is a man researchers have only been able to identify by a set of initials repeated again and again in Eleanor's later entries. A senior researcher, older than most, who becomes something close to a second leader on the island by 1943. In her early pages, Eleanor describes him with real respect. He keeps people calm. He organizes food fairly, even when there is barely enough to share. He is, by every early account, the reason the island does not collapse into panic during its hardest months. But slowly, page by page, his role begins to shift into something far more complicated. The same calm confidence that once held the community together starts to sound in Eleanor's later entries less like leadership and more like control. There are also the military officers assigned to guard the island. At first, they simply follow orders, rule-bound and distant, treating the scientists as assets to protect rather than people to know. But years of shared hardship slowly changed them too, splitting their loyalty between the orders they were given and the people they have now lived beside, raised children beside, and buried friends beside. And finally, far away in London, there are the officials who authorized Station Zero in the first place. Not villains, just overwhelmed people fighting a war on a dozen fronts at once, who slowly, carelessly lose track of the very secret they created. Some of them, records suggest, genuinely forget the island exists at all. For the first full year, Station Zero works exactly as planned. Eleanor's early diary pages read almost cheerfully. Long days in the laboratory, research quietly sent back to the mainland through a single trusted courier line. Evenings spent teaching the island's children to read the stars. Then, in spring of 1942, the supply ship disappears 3 miles from the eastern shore. 2 weeks later, the radio operator sends an emergency message describing lights in the water that do not behave like any known vessel and a request for immediate evacuation. But Whitehall denies it. The full reason has never been released. From that moment, contact with the island becomes irregular, then rare, then for 6 long years, almost completely severed. The surviving records from this stretch are thin, and every historian who studies them notices the same pattern. A handful of coded messages arrive over the years, always short, confirming only that the population remains stable. In 1944, one photograph makes it out through channels nobody has ever fully explained. It shows children playing in a stone courtyard, laughing, healthy, completely unaware their home officially does not exist. After that photograph, the silence closes back in. By 1946, even the small circle of officials who once knew about Station Zero have quietly begun to wonder if anyone there is still alive. Between those 2 years lies a long, slow stretch that Eleanor's diary captures better than any official file ever could. Winters that feel endless, a single case of illness that spreads through half the island before anyone can stop it. A funeral held for someone who, technically, according to every government record, was never even born. Meanwhile, on the island itself, Eleanor's diary tells a very different story. Food shortages stretch for months, arguments break out over rationing, children grow up who have never known anything but this island, some of them born there and never once seeing the mainland at all. And the man with the initials, once a calming presence, begins arguing, quietly at first, that the island no longer needs the mainland. By 1944, he is saying it openly in front of the whole community. More and more people are starting to listen. Here is something worth sitting with. We already know from the very opening of this story that all 500 people survive. The rescue ship reaches them in 1946. Nobody dies waiting. So the real tension in this story was never about whether they would live. It is about what 6 years of isolation quietly did to them, what they were willing to hide, and what it cost them to keep hiding it. There is a second layer of irony too. For decades, researchers assumed the missing supply ship was simply lost to bad weather, one small tragedy among thousands during the war. Newly cross-referenced records now tell a very different story, one the island's own leadership understood long before anyone on the mainland ever did. Every strange detail planted early in this story eventually gets an answer. The strange lights in the water described in that 1942 radio message are finally explained by a brief mention buried inside German wartime records. A U-boat drifting off course, hunting for Allied ships near the Scottish coast, picks up a radio signal coming from an island that every chart in its possession marks as completely empty. Curious, it moves in closer. The 1944 photograph of children in the courtyard, smuggled out through channels nobody has explained, later turns out to carry a heavier cost than anyone expected. Once family testimony reveals who risked sending it and why. And the 14-month delay before the 1946 rescue, first mentioned almost in passing, turns out to have a cause almost too simple to believe. Somewhere in London, a routine file transfer is misplaced, sitting untouched inside the wrong filing cabinet for over a year, while 500 people wait on a forgotten island for a rescue that has already been approved and simply never sent. No sabotage, no conspiracy, just one tired clerk, one wrong drawer, and 14 months nobody on that island will ever get back. The confrontation between the U-boat and the island's hidden defenses, pieced together from incomplete records on both sides, appears to be the true fate of the missing supply ship, caught in the very same encounter before it can ever reach the shore. According to Eleanor's diary, the island's own leadership makes a deliberate choice afterward not to report the full truth back to London. If Whitehall learns that Station Zero engaged directly with an enemy vessel and that its own denied evacuation order likely got a British crew killed, the fallout could be enormous at the worst possible moment in the war. It seems safer, and in some strange way kinder, to simply let the silence stand. The cover-up does not begin in a London office. It begins on the island itself, agreed on quietly by people who had already learned over years of isolation how to keep a secret from the very government that trained them to keep secrets in the first place. By the time the rescue ship finally arrives in 1946, the island community has already decided, together, in long, tense meetings held before the ship even finishes docking, exactly what will be told to the outside world and what will stay buried. Several residents, including the man who once argued for permanent independence, reportedly refuse to ever speak about certain parts of those 6 years, some of them keeping that silence until the day they die. Picture the moment itself. A grey Scottish morning in 1942. Fog sits low over the water. A stealthy submarine surfaces quietly near the eastern shore, its crew scanning the coastline, confused by a radio signal coming from land that should not exist on any chart in front of them. At the same moment, the British supply ship is cutting through the same stretch of water, right on schedule, its crew thinking of nothing more than an ordinary delivery run. On the island, hidden defenses built years earlier, purely as a precaution nobody ever expected to use, are triggered for the first time. What follows happens fast and in near total darkness on both sides of the water. Radio static, shouted orders, a brief, violent exchange that lasts only minutes but changes everything that comes after it. When it ends, the submarine is gone. So it now appears is the British supply ship, caught in the same encounter, sunk before it can ever send a single warning back to the mainland. Now picture 1946. A rescue ship, delayed for over a year, finally rounds the same headland. Its crew expects to find ruins or nothing at all. Instead, they find sturdy homes built by hand, working greenhouses, and children who stare back at them like they are the strange ones. Smoke curls up from stone chimneys. Someone is hanging washed clothes on a line, as if this were any ordinary morning. Before the gangplank even touches the dock, island leaders are already meeting in a locked room, deciding, together, what these strangers from the mainland will be allowed to know. At its heart, this story is about what secrecy protects and what it quietly destroys. Station Zero was built to save Britain's best minds from being lost to war. In many ways, it worked exactly as planned. But the same secrecy that protected those 500 people also nearly erased them completely from their own country's memory.
Look at this detail here.
It raises a question researchers still argue about today. If an isolated community builds something that genuinely works on its own terms, does it earn the right to stay hidden even after the reason for hiding it is gone? Or does every secret, no matter how well it works, eventually owe the truth to the people it was built to protect? Every thread in this story eventually leads back to the same place. Eleanor's private diary, the missing supply ship, the U-boat nobody in London ever knew about, the filing error that stole over a year, the quiet power struggle over whether the island should ever go home at all. None of these are separate mysteries. They are the same mystery seen from 5 different angles, all of them pointing toward one final unanswered question. How much of what came back to Britain in 1946 was the truth, and how much was simply what the island decided the truth should be? Officially, Station Zero was quietly closed down in late 1946. Its remaining residents were resettled across Britain, some given new identities, all of them bound by strict secrecy laws, never to discuss what had truly happened. For 50 full years, that silence held completely. It was only through a recent records release, cross-referenced carefully with Eleanor Vance's declassified diary and a handful of surviving family testimonies, that researchers were finally able to piece this story together. Even now, huge parts of it remain unclear. We still do not know the full name of the man who wanted the island to stay independent forever. We do not know exactly how many of the 500 agreed with him. We only know that something significant was decided in those final tense meetings before the rescue ship's crew ever stepped ashore. Some of the descendants who agreed to speak with researchers say their parents never once mentioned the island at all, not even briefly, not even by accident. Others say the opposite, that certain nights, usually late, their parents would talk about it for hours in careful, guarded language, as if some part of that 6-year silence had never really ended, even decades later, sitting safely in an ordinary British kitchen. What we do know is this: when that ship finally reached the rocky coast in 1946, it did more than rescue 500 people from an island the world believed was empty. It closed the door on 6 years of a hidden version of Britain, one that had built its own rules, guarded its own secrets, and quietly decided, entirely on its own terms, exactly what the rest of the country would ever be allowed to know. Eleanor Vance's very last diary entry was written the night before that rescue ship finally reached the shore. In it, she asks one simple question the official records have never truly answered. She writes, "How much of us will they actually take back?" 50 years later, historians are still trying to work out exactly what she meant.